Mr. Hlungwani, thank you very much for making time and welcome to The Bigger Picture. The Bigger Picture is a show where we try to give our viewers the story, an in-depth analysis of the story, and so that they can have a better understanding of issues as they occur. And the reason why we invited you here, Mr. Hlungwani, you've got an in-depth knowledge of the wage negotiations between the employer, which is government, especially in the context of public sector workers. Uh, you have in-depth knowledge of that process, and we would like you to advise or to sort of take us into confidence as to how is that process going. So far, we've had a number of media reports, and we just want to understand to hear from the horse's mouth how true those some of those remarks that were made are. And it is in that context really that we thank you for making time for being here with us as a president of DENOSA, and as I said, a leader of COSATU who with that in-depth knowledge of the process. Welcome and bless you for being here.
Thank you very much, and let me greet your viewers. And I must indicate that I am also acting or representing the unions within COSATU, public sector unions within COSATU. So because I'm the convener of the Joint Mandating Committee of COSATU, which is the structure for all the public service unions within COSATU framework. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks a lot and for clarifying that. Mr. Hlungwani, one thing, let's start here. Yesterday, COSATU, SAFTU, and I think the third federation started a day before COSATU and SAFTU. You held separate marches in which, let's start right there. What was the objective of that march? What did COSATU hope to achieve?
Well, the march was a Section 77 march, which is informed by the socio-economic conditions that which the working class is facing in the country, which includes joblessness, unemployment, the difficulties that the working class is facing in general. That includes the high costs for energy in terms of electricity, the high cost of food prices, transportation, not having even reliable public transport systems in South Africa. So essentially that was that as an overarching purpose of the march. But when you look at it, you can dissect it into several components. So for example, we had to march to ESCOM, because on annual basis, ESCOM just wants to increase the cost for electricity in terms of the pricing. They go and request NERSA to increase. But over and above that, Department of Energy would be the one that allows ESCOM to go as it is. And you can look at it, ESCOM is forever collapsing. So we had to also send them a memorandum to Department of Mineral and Energy. We go to Treasury. Treasury is the one that is driving the economic trajectory in the country on behalf of government. So you would know that the finance minister is the one that would pass the budget or give us the policy framework. Currently, we are against what they are doing because we call it, they are using the austerity budget, which we believe is a neoliberal approach or policy framework. In an instance where you have an economic crisis like ours, where poverty is a daily reality for many of our South African people, where the cost of living is unaffordable, where everything just increases on a daily basis, we believe the policy should not be the cost containment policies that they are doing in terms of the austerity measures that they are forever applying. For example, in the austerity measures, they say they will restrict employment, but we know when you have a crisis in the economic policies in terms of the economic performance, like it would have happened during the Great Depressions in the 1929s, the government of America at that time would have gone into a serious social spending to alleviate poverty, to deal with hunger and starvation. They created a lot of public or government jobs in order to lift people out of that poverty. And as a consequence, when people make a little earning, they spend that money within the economic cycle, thus then they revive the economy. So essentially, that's why we had to go to the Department of Provincial Treasury in Limpopo and National Treasury in Pretoria. But when we went to the Office of the Premier, was to say they must deal with this policy framework that they are doing. You would know that there is what they call moratoriums. They tell departments, for example, in health, in education,
In Limpopo.
they don't employ people who are retired. They don't replace people who retire, who die, and all those kind of things.
The retirees, yes.
Yes. So that's what we had to say to them: stop these things because it's not assisting our country.
No, thank you very much for that, Hlungwani. But before I take you on some of the points that you touched on, one, I wanted to understand what has been the impact, and I'm asking this purely because based on the observation. You held separate marches with SAFTU, and I think between your COSATU and SAFTU, you are the biggest federations, labor federations in the country. And yet, yesterday you held two separate marches. Though your demands and your grievances are similar, why was that? Why could you not speak to SAFTU, have a united front, and come together as federations of labor unions in South Africa, and present your memorandum of your demands collectively as federations?
Well, I must indicate that I will only speak for COSATU because that's where I come from. But I must indicate to you, that we have had engagements. We are the first to have applied for the Section 77 and filed a notice to ask for a strike, ask for the JOC to approve the rules and all that. And then at that time, we then realized that there's also SAFTU who plans the similar activities on the same day, but we only learned later on. We've had attempts where we spoke, but we could not have a joint march per se, but it would have been a desirable way to do it. But as you could see, we started from the same place. We went to almost like similar drop-off points for handing over of memorandum. But the fact is that it means that the nuts and bolts could not be finalized. Probably it's because of the time factor and all that. But you must also appreciate the fact that we have different catchment areas in terms of the masses. So we mobilize our own members. They indicate we must march. So we listen to them and we follow what they say we must do. And equally, SAFTU would follow what their members are saying. But the point you are raising is that I think the point essentially that must be clear is that workers divided, they stand a lot to lose. But yesterday, for me, I don't think there was a division because we were all marching and we were all sending memorandums to the same place. So we achieved the same thing. We may have used different time slots, as you could see. We were given 10 o'clock, they were given 9 o'clock. So we can even say those who are in power, they deliberately divided us when we intended to be together.
But I don't know if we can simply say that those in power deliberately divided yourselves or divided labor. I think labor created that space for division. You created, everybody could tell that there is no harmony, there's no unity amongst labor federations, and it's easy under those circumstances to simply just come in between and divide the federations, the labor federations. And I don't know how significant is that division in terms of impeding labor, in terms of achieving your objectives in terms of making the lives of the workers' life better and constantly trying to improve the working conditions for labor. How significant is that division in those circumstances?
Well, I think the struggle is the same, but I may also draw you to the resolutions of COSATU, which is far back to many congresses that were held, and there's no congress that has ever changed it. But the resolution was to say, as a resolution of the congress, one sector, one union, one country, one federation. So it is our envisaged goal that we should have one federation in a country, and in one sector we must have only one union. In other words, we will strive and do our best to unite the working class, because we need to have a unity in purpose. And if we are divided, we only have ourselves to lose in terms of the chains that are binding us, all of us. So in as much as I would agree that yesterday's march, in the manner in which it has gone, it would have appeared that we were divided. But I think what became a factor there was that there was no dialogue that united us beforehand, and it was too late when we were mobilizing to can even nut those bolts and so on. But nevertheless, the struggle is the same, and the strategy and the tactics remained the same, which means the workers were united in purpose, although they were not united from the same point, but they drove the same message, and they marched the same strategy and everything. So I would say we have sent the same messages. The only divisions could be the identity. But as COSATU, our ultimate goal is that we must have one federation in a country, and we must have one union in a sector. So that's how we can arrive. And we are committed to engage any federation. We are committed to engage any union to work together for unity in purpose. But I think the bigger problem we have in South Africa is not within the union movement. The bigger problem is that the number of members that we together organize are less than 50% of the working class, which is for me the bigger goal that we must try and address, because the percentage of the members of a union in the entire country is not more than 27%, which means we have 73% of members of the working population that is not unionized. That's where the bigger problem is, ultimately. But we are pleased, because when you looked at the turnout, it showed that the workers were committed and were hungry for this action. And that's why we would say that ultimately we were pleased with what we demonstrated yesterday.
Well, I guess we'll look at that. We'll watch that space to see if there will be movement as time goes on between two federations in terms of either cooperation or eventually getting back to having one big COSATU. As we know that SAFTU, before it became SAFTU, it was part and parcel of COSATU. But I just want to move slightly forward. You touched on poverty. You said one of the reasons why you went out to this protest march is because of the levels of poverty that are prevalent in the country. And I wanted to check with you that don't you think from the labor union perspective, the point at which you're trying to deal with poverty maybe might need to be relooked at this way? Right now, you are mobilizing for better working conditions for your members. Your members are predominantly employed nurses and other government officials. What about those people who are not employed? Is it not about time, though, that as labor unions in South Africa, that you advocated for less stringent labor laws that will accommodate, or that will, in a way, make it easy for companies, organizations to employ more people, such that inequality and poverty could be minimized?
Yeah, I think you do have a point. We may differ in how we could strategize it. One is that we don't think there's anything wrong with the labor laws in the country. We do believe there's a problem with enforcement of labor laws in the country. For example, we don't believe that people must be employed and earn less than the minimum wage. And we do know that in some places, people are employed in a precarious situations where an employee would earn less than the cost of transport to the employment. It means if you work, you spend 2,000 rand to go to work, but you earn 1,700. You are as good as you are unemployed, because on a monthly basis, you have to go to Mashonisa to cover the other 300 rand for the transport that you use. Over and above that, you must still live You must still buy food for your children. So we don't believe there's anything wrong with the labor laws. However, our call is to say we must have a massive public employment in South Africa. I will give you an example of in the teaching sector. We have many unemployed graduates who are teachers, qualified for that matter. We are saying they must be employed because we do have the teacher assistants and all that, but the question is, why would you only have a teacher assistant when you even have a teacher who's graduated and qualified to teach? So we're saying they must scale up that. Also, we are saying they must employ even unemployed nurses. They must not languish in poverty. And as much as you are correct to say most of our members are employed, yes, it's true, but we represent those who are also unemployed. We are saying there must be a vigorous public employment so that we remove people who are graduates from unemployment status to employment status. But over and above that, we're saying government must release funds into the economic circles in order to stimulate economic growth by way of creating demand. For example, I'll give you an example of the government housing scheme. We as the public servants have been saving money, which at the current moment, I think it is said it's close to 40 billion as it were, which is the money that individual public servants have been saving for housing, which is preserved at Treasury. We are saying if we create a component of a government housing scheme, that money should be released from the savings into the circulation by way of stimulating the housing industry. When you do that, employment will be in the value chain of the housing, the cement producers, the windows, aluminum producers, the glass producers, the whole system will beneficiate by creating a demand, but also we'll be employing our own brothers who are able to build our own houses. So we'll be stimulating growth. In that, those people will not be our members who are benefiting directly, but some will be our members because some will be in the built industry, some will be Sakau members in the retail and all that, because once the money is released into circulation, the demand will boom. As a result, the economy will then be fleshed out. And when they earn their income at the end of the month, they will still spend it in the shops where we're buying clothes, food, and all that. So you re-energize the economic cycles itself. That's what we believe can assist our economy. But when you do austerity measures, you restrict expenditure and you don't stimulate any growth anywhere else. That's why we don't believe in austerity measures that government is applying. That's why we are forcing government to say, be free to spend so that people are out of the poverty. Infrastructure projects must be released because in itself, it is the way of business doing business in South Africa. Not only, I think the easy target is labor laws, which for me it's not. It's more of how do you enforce it, but how do you also become creative around it? Because some companies that are saying our laws are too strict, they mean they want to fire a person at a go without following any procedure. And we don't believe that should be the case. Because at some point, it's just as much as in the past where people would be accused of a certain criminal offense and they would get maybe a death sentence, they get killed. And then later you learn that, in fact, they were not wrong. You can't reverse that process. That's why we say, before you even apply dismissal, there's a procedure that you must follow. And if you are right, you shouldn't worry about that procedure because you would know that you are already correct. So that's why we don't believe there's a problem with labor laws in the country.
All right. No, thanks for that, Hlungwani. You know, I would like us to move slightly further because, quite frankly, the issue of the march and the demands or the objectives of that march, it was just an opportunistic questions that since you are here, I felt I needed to take advantage of the moment and ask you those questions. I think what's the most important right now, what is topical, is the negotiations, the wage negotiations that have been going on for some time now. We know that last year, as public sector workers, you accepted 1,000 rand gratuity fee or amount from government. And this year, government proposed the same amount with, I think, about 2%. Why are you not accepting that?
Let me outrightly indicate that you must also recollect that while we were negotiating, government was saying to us they are giving us the 2%. During that process, we said to them they must go and improve their offer. We then immediately heard that the president, through the recommendation of National Treasury, has approved 3% for public office bearers. Who are these public office bearers? Is the president himself, the ministers, the cabinet as a whole, the parliament, the mayors, the MMCs, the MECs, and the premiers. And they even further said they're backdating it to 2021, which means they're giving themselves 3% over the period of 24 months. But they are saying to us, you must accept 2% from the date that which you sign going forward. If you were to reason that the same premiers, the same mayors and cabinet ministers and legislatures, all of them, there is no one who earns less than $1 million per annum, which means on monthly basis, there is none of them who earns less than 100,000 on monthly basis. But they are telling a person who earns 8,000 a month to accept a 2%, to be only effected from the date that which you sign. Now, if at all cost, we can't reason even mathematically that what is done on the left must be done on the right, it means our conscience is dead. If we cannot want to break the circle of poverty, that the wage gap in South Africa is too huge. Hence, you have a parliamentarian ordinary who earns way more than $1 million per annum. And you have an ordinary level 1 employee in government who earns less than 8,000. And the same person is told you must accept a smaller percentage. Then if we can't understand to be a fair argument, it means our conscience is dead. We don't understand what we're saying. But secondly, if the reason by cabinet to increase their own, to give themselves a huge increase and backdate it for many months, is because they have suffered during COVID, they have suffered due to economic pressures that we have, such as the food prices. It means if we can reason that we don't have food for the poor, prices for the poor, we don't have food prices for the public servants who is in our members, and different food prices for parliamentarians, it would mean that indeed we are saying there is the animal farm in South Africa where some animals are more equal than others. In fact, the only reasoning way could be to give public servants more because they earn less and give less to those who earn more. That's the only way you can bridge the wage gap. So that's our fair reason. But over and above that, you would know that public servants, you take nurses, they never had a lockdown. They kept on going to the hospitals to show dedication. When they closed parliament, hospitals were working. When they closed parliament, the clinics were working. So why don't they appreciate
the police and the soldiers were still working?
And so essentially, if we can't reason beyond that, for me, it would mean that really we don't really understand what we're saying. And essentially, if you look at a person who earns less, I can give you an example of myself. My own sisters lost jobs because they were in retail. And in retail, they were told, we can't continue to employ you. We don't even have money anymore because lockdown has closed their businesses. Now, the little that I earn, I must assist my sisters with their children. So if we reason that economic pressures has hit all of us and we say public servants are not hit by economic pressures, then it simply means we do not understand what we're saying. And we want to perpetuate the animal farm theology or let's say ideology in South Africa. It can't be that is correct. That's our view.
No, absolutely not. But now, since then to this point, how far apart are the two parties?
We have made a demand.
I know you started at about 10%.
Yes.
I know you started at about 10% with that 2% plus 1,000 rand gratuity from government. Has there been any movement from either side to try to close the distance between the two parties?
Yes, I must indicate that the developments were, although they were rigorous and tough, we have moved from 10%, we went to 8%, we have also moved from 8 to 7%, and currently we are at 6.5%, over and above the gratuity. Government has started from 0%. It moved to 1.5% and currently at 2%. We have made it clear to them that we will not accept anything less than what they are giving themselves. It is our expectation that they will be reasonable and they will move higher. As of last week, Friday, we have declared a deadlock because they failed to move on 2 consecutive meetings that were held in more than 2 weeks. They came back with a 2%. They came back again to another meeting with a 2%. They came back again to another meeting with a 2%, which made us believe that they're not prepared to move. As a result, we then said, we are deadlocking. If they are prepared to unlock the deadlock, they must move. If they do not move, it means we are following a dispute process, which will then means we will file for a dispute which can lead to conciliation and should we be granted as a certificate. The certificate, in case of a dispute of interest, the certificate will say you have a right to go on strike. It's undesirable. But if they don't move, they will invite us to a strike. We gave them, we said the ball is in their court, they must avert the strike. So we will see what they will do. But I must indicate that they have then subsequently requested us for a meeting today where they say we must explore mechanisms to break the deadlock. And it is our view that it means they want to improve the offer or to offer something to the solution on the table. So it is our wish that negotiators, if they go to the meeting today, we will get something better out of that. Thank you very much.
You know, something says maybe we should have had this conversation a little later had one known that there will be such developments taking place today. But nonetheless, since you have touched on the deadlock and the possibility of obtaining the certificate, which will then lead you or see you going to the streets, I wanted to ask you, the PSA has since received the same that certificate. I think as we speak now, they are in the process of polling between them within their membership to check if members have got appetite for strike action. Why has it taken you as COSATU affiliates in the public sector so long to act with a similar speed to impose your interest, your demands on government? It appears as if you are not as forceful as other unions within the same space are. Why do you think that is the case, or that perception exists about you as COSATU unions?
Yes, I must indicate to you that we believe in the Labor Relations Act. We also believe in not short-circuiting any process. We also believe, not only believe, but we are member-driven. So before we take any decision, we consult our members. So when we sit in a meeting and the employer gives us anything new, and we know where our parameters could be limited, we go back to our members. I don't want to speak about others, but we have followed that process because with us, we don't move leaving our members behind. So when we have new developments, we go and consult our members. And when we say our members, we're talking about a number of members. So we don't miss a branch that we don't consult. And we don't pronounce statements that are not mandated by members. So with us, we have been following that. And in the period that we've agreed, we have been on the ground consulting members. So by the time that others moved, and for that matter, it's not only COSATU unions, to correct you. FEDUSA has also followed the process of mandating, because with us, there's nothing we say without going with our members. We firstly consult our members, then our members tell us what to say. This is why when we go on strike, we go on strike. We don't go on strike on media. We don't tell media that we're going on strike. We filed to go on strike. So we really go on strike, not persuade you that we will go on a strike. That's why if you look at the strikes in the past, we have gone to the strike. We have not gone to media that we're going on strike and then we cancel a strike in the last minute. Because we know we mobilize our members on the ground. That is the difference between us and some others, and they will not name anybody. And if anybody bangs on us, our members will only listen to us because they voted us to listen to us. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Look, you know, now that you say you've got this late meeting with government, with the employer later on today, I'm tempted to ask you, as COSATU, walking into that meeting, what will a compromised position or a movement from government look like? I mean, there were a mention of 4 conditions that the employer had tabled from the previous round, which labor unions has outrightly rejected. So moving into today's discussion with the employer, what will a movement from their side look like?
Okay. To deal break, they must firstly remove all conditions that they put. And I must reason for you to understand why we say they must remove conditions. The conditions they are putting, one of them is to say employees above 60 years of age will be asked by the employer to retire. And we believe, okay, one of the other conditions is to say they will implement voluntary severance packages or voluntary severance packages where they will ask anyone who's willing to retire at any age to retire without penalty. Now, we are saying they must remove it because that is not a bargaining issue. It is the law in the country. If for operational reasons they so wish to want to consult union to deal with those things, for example, VSP whatsoever, the section 189 of the Labor Relations Act allows them to consult us, not to bargain with us. And I'm drawing a distinction, consultation versus bargaining. Now, you can't have a government that appears as if it doesn't know its own laws. Labor Relations Act, it's a government law that allows them to consult. It doesn't allow them to bargain. So we're saying to them, remove those things because essentially the law empowers you to follow this particular process. And we're always going to listen to you. You don't have to make it a resolution because what remains superior in terms of law is an act of parliament. And the Labor Relations Act is an act of parliament. You don't have to draw a resolution because the resolution is it's junior to the supreme law of the country. So they act vulnerable, but they are in charge of the same laws. So we will not accept it because it then means we have people who are in charge. But these people who are in charge, they don't know that they're in charge. So basically, that's what
they don't trust their own power.
They don't trust their own power. This is why everything collapses. It's because people don't know that we have power to enforce. So basically, we're saying they mustn't do that. They mustn't compound this whole thing. They must follow what is the prescribed law in the country, and it shouldn't be anything. There's anything wrong from that. But over and above that, because they were putting these conditions to say we can give you 3%, provided you agree to these conditions. So which means they were not prepared to offer the 3%, but they have the 3%. That's what led us to a deadlock. We said to them, now you think you're playing games. If you invite us to a strike, we'll come to the strike. But offer us the 3% without conditions. We'll then start talking. Yes.
All right. Yeah. As we move closer to maybe to conclusion, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, STSA released, and this is one of those opportunistic questions because you are here. STSA released July figures for inflation, and it came up at about 7.8%, which is higher than June figures of 7.4%. And I think from the labor perspective, this continues to erode the buying power of workers. But contrary to that, or I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a cushion, we saw employment numbers 2 days ago looking positive, unemployment having dropped slightly, ever so slightly. And when you look at those numbers, we still are not at the level we were in terms of unemployment before COVID. What is DENOSA's position or view on this? What's your remark on that, on those two events?
Yes, I must indicate that it is disturbing that our economy is not recovering. That basically that's a symptom of an economy that is not recovering. This is why we even had to march, because we are saying to government, don't act vulnerable. As government, employ or apply strategic directives that will assist government to improve our economy. One is that unemployment will not improve for so long as they are not having public employment programs. Even that improvement could have been driven by the little that they did when President would have announced that you're going to employ more in the teaching sector and a little bit more in the security sector, in the police and all that. We're saying they must do more than that, because if they don't do that, we will not get out of this economic crisis. Inflation is really a serious problem. That's why we want unless our economy improves, our GDP will not grow, but also the inflation will keep on going up, because it means as far back between June and July, we are spending more on simple basic food items. And you would remember that, I'll give an example of we normally use the cooking oil. Cooking oil in December, the 2 liter was around 40 Rand or less. If you go and buy it now, it's more than 100 Rand. The price has gone 3 times more higher. So the more inflation goes up, and it's compounded by the Ukraine war or the Russia-Ukraine tensions, which affects all the imports and the distribution of certain items across the world. It means as South Africa, the government must be willing to come up with measures beyond the normal in order to improve our conditions. One will be to look into how the social spending can be improved, but also our government is not serious when it comes to certain areas that we can leverage on. For example, in terms of the energy sector, we don't understand why government cannot look at the renewable energy and drive itself, not only rely on private company in the terms of the independent power producers. In Limpopo, there's a lot of sun. We cry that it's too hot here. If they give us solar power or if they plant solar power, that energy can be planted into the grid and we don't have a problem. And also this economic crisis that we have is also because it's compounded by Eskom not providing reliable energy. So some businesses, instead of being productive, it has to stop producing for a certain number of times. So they must deal with the energy crisis. But over and above that, we have good land in Limpopo and Mpumalanga and all over. Why don't the government implement support mechanisms by providing water easily to the rural areas and encourage our mothers and sisters to plow crops that they can use for subsistence farming all over? In other words, when the food is too high to buy, for the sake of nutrition, give people apparatus and mechanisms to even grow their own food. So there are many mechanisms that they can apply, remove people from social distress, remove people from poverty, prevent hunger and starvation and all that. But with the lack of those mechanisms or interventions, that's why things are becoming worse. And soon we don't want to have people who die from famine, like it happens in Uganda, the East and the Central Africa, as it were, when people have these opportunities. And sometimes you end up then asking the UN to intervene. But in South Africa, we have many opportunities. We're saying government must take these opportunities, intervene correctly, assist the population in general. That's what we believe can assist us. And we think if the Ukraine war doesn't improve, doesn't get, the tensions do not reduce, we are still going to have a skyrocketing inflation on a monthly basis, which is going to be a serious problem going forward. But we're just saying government is capable of intervening correctly. Is that our ministers, they appear vulnerable than to appear in charge? That's where the problem is. Thank you very much.
All right. In lastly, maybe in few minutes, there's an elephant in the room. Finance minister has been, and I'm asking this because it's a Women's Month in South Africa, and we've had number of speeches.
Please assist me. I think my network bandwidth was giving me trouble. Since you said the finance minister, it stopped.
Yes.
It stopped right then.
Okay. Yes, I was saying that there's an elephant in the room. Minister Hlungwani has been accused, or there's been allegations against him of sexual assault. And I'm saying, in the context of August being the Women's Month in South Africa, what is your view? What do you make of these allegations as COSATU, as DENOSA, around the finance minister? Yeah. And what do you think? Do you think the call from some quarters that he must recuse himself from office are warranted at this stage, or indeed he needs to wait until he's been charged and the whole thing has been cleared legally? What's your position on this?
Well, if we were to, and indeed it's August, it's Women's Month, and I must indicate, just not playing the devil's advocate, but probably sounding more controversial, that in the same Women's Month, we've seen the woman who's the MEC saying something that shows that she was demeaning or victimizing another woman who was a patient in a hospital. So when we talk of the Women's Month and we're serious, we must balance our thinking across those lines. But I must indicate that indeed the allegations are serious. Whether the test is one to be removed temporarily or permanently from the position, or to recuse himself or not, we think the test of our laws in the country, and I must say, I'm saying this because the victim, or who's alleging, is a worker. So essentially, I should treat her as part of my members. She's part of us. She's the working class. If indeed there was anything, yes, it could be that it would have been, or it would be very wrong for the minister to have abused her in that way. But I would not go deeper in commenting on that, because the context and the investigation must reveal what actually happened. And I must say, I'm saying this because you would have received a lot of conflicting media information. So when you rely on reports, somebody says this, somebody says that, the best way is to deal with a concrete report that reveals the facts. And indeed, if he is found wanting and he is charged, I would think he should not continue to serve in that portfolio. But as to whether he would leave now when it is still allegation and under investigation and there are no veracity of the case itself, I would think it's something else that might need to be properly interpreted, because I don't know what would be the test in that space. But we would support this worker if indeed she was being abused. That is wrong. And mind you, when we looked at the age difference, it would be worrisome that the minister at his age and that poor child at that age, something of this nature could happen, and it could happen during the Women's Month. We would not know what could have happened per se, but let the investigation give us. But I do think that even possibly if the police are failing to investigate, because this would be a criminal offense, but one would not wonder if the the Human Rights Commission would not want to jump in, or maybe they are still thinking it's too early. The public protector would not want to jump in because remember the minister is held at the highest bar of either personal or executive performance and behavior. So one would wonder, but it will be important because we know we are living in a political environment sometimes. People do get set up. It's a reality. But we don't want to think this, we would want to take which side, but we would always support a worker. Because in this regard, if it happens, she will be the most vulnerable person because she will not be coming from position of any authority. And the minister will be coming from the position of authority and the position of power because he would have money and the position of authority in terms of his office. But also in terms of
and influence as well.
and influence, including seniority by virtue of age. So that's why we would always side with the worker. And in this regard, we hope that that worker is our member within the union movement. She's not part of the 73 that are not organized.
All right, that's someone. Thank you very much for taking time to be with us here. You know, at the end of the day, when it's said and done, as South Africans, we need a functioning public service. We need to have a public service that has motivated workforce, that has a workforce, and one thing that can motivate the workforce in the Hlungwani is for workers to have a conducive work environment, having their interests being taken care of in all respects. And if that can be done, if that discussion can be had between yourselves as labor and the employer, I think we're going to have that which we desire, which is a well-functioning and professional public service. And I think for me and many South Africans, that is the bigger picture, a functioning and a professional public service. And with those words, I really wish to thank you for making time to be with us here.
Well, thank you very much. I must indicate that I think I enjoyed the interview because it was a free-flowing, a wide range of questions, indeed intriguing, but this is what we would build our country because some subjects may appear sensitive, but we do need to talk about it. That's what I appreciate. That's what I appreciate by this interview. I appreciate that.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a lovely day.
Thanks. You too. Enjoy the rest of the day. Keep on.
Cheers. Thank you once again, guys, for watching. I hope you enjoyed the conversation I just had with Mr. Hlungwani, DENOSA president, and the convener for COSATU negotiating team in the public sector. Please remember to subscribe on this channel, like it, leave us a comment and let us know what you think of the discussion we just had. Lastly, click that notification icon so that you get a notice next time we upload the new material. Thank you very much.